Ever feel like your study habits are just totally like on autopilot, especially uh, this time of year, right? It's real, that mid-semester slump. But what if we could actually like rewire our brains to embrace those late night study sessions?
Yeah.
So today we're diving deep into, the psychology of study motivation.
Yeah, and no cheesy posters, we promise.
No, none of that.
This goes way beyond just getting good grades. Think of this as unlocking your potential, like long-term success.
Yeah, because honestly, who remembers their GPA like 10 years later? This is about building habits that, set you up for success in life, whatever that looks like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it all starts with, I think, understanding that why behind the want. It's easy to just get like so bogged down in the day-to-day, grind of it all. But remembering the bigger picture, your aspirations, your goals, that can be a huge motivator.
Yeah, it's like that feeling when you get, so absorbed in a product you're passionate about, you totally lose track of time. You're in the zone.
Absolutely.
That's the kind of energy I think we're trying to tap into here, even when it comes to studying.
And that's where the whole like motivation versus discipline thing comes in.
Yeah.
So think of motivation as that initial spark, right?
Yeah.
The excitement. That's what gets you going.
It's like New Year's Day when you're like, this is it. This is the year I finally learn,
Yeah, exactly.
Managed to
This is the year.
download that language app and then silence. Weeks of silence.
Exactly. And that's where the discipline comes in. Discipline is the engine that keeps you going, even when the excitement fades a bit. So it's less about, those fleeting feelings and more about building those consistent habits.
Okay, so then how do we bridge that gap? Because we've all had those moments where willpower alone just doesn't cut it.
One of the most powerful tools, I think, is goal setting.
Okay.
But not the vague kind. Not like, I want to do well in school. No. We're talking laser focus here.
Yeah.
Specific, measurable, achievable goals that give you a roadmap.
So instead of be more organized, it's like, I'm going to create a study schedule.
Exactly.
But actually stick to it.
Yes.
For like 2 weeks.
Yes. And that brings us to routine. You see, our brains, they crave those patterns. When we establish a steady routine, we're basically training our brains to get focused more easily.
It's not just willpower then. It's like creating an environment that actually supports focus, which I love. It's like they say, motivation gets you started, habit keeps you going. Something like that.
Absolutely. And speaking of habits, there's this great technique called the Pomodoro technique.
Oh, yeah.
So this involves alternating between like these focused work sessions, let's say like 25 minutes,
Okay.
and then you take short breaks.
I've heard of that. It's like interval training, but for your brain.
Precisely. And it works because it aligns with like how long we can naturally focus. And while that routine is really key, it's also important to figure out your learning style. Because we don't all learn the same way, obviously. What works for me might not work for you.
This is so true. I'm like a visual learner. Give me all the diagrams, flashcards, mind maps.
Yeah.
But my best friend, he's all about like listening to recordings and having discussions.
There you go. So listener, think about a time where you really felt like you mastered something. What was the setting? What were you doing? Were you by yourself? Were you with other people?
Yeah, like how did you study?
Exactly.
What really like worked?
Yeah. How did you absorb the information?
Yes.
Because once you understand that, you could tailor your study habits to actually work for you.
It's like having a superpower that you didn't even realize you had.
Yes, exactly.
It's like you're speaking a whole different language,
Yeah.
right? You're learning language. And then those study sessions are less of a chore and more like solving a puzzle.
Exactly. And speaking of those aha moments, I think one thing that's so important for staying motivated is recognizing your progress, even the small wins.
Okay, so like giving ourselves a high five every time we finish a chapter, even if it takes like 3 hours.
Yes, it might seem small, but celebrating those wins, it actually impacts your brain.
Yeah.
Like it makes you want to keep going.
It's like laying down the welcome mat for those good study vibes,
Yeah.
I actually had this happen to me when I was training for a half marathon. So instead of thinking about those daunting 13 miles, I celebrated every mile I ran, every early morning.
And I bet that made those early mornings a lot easier.
Oh, totally. So by race day, like my brain was just wired for progress. It wasn't even really about the finish line at that point, which is, it was a game changer.
It's amazing how just shifting your perspective can have such a huge impact on your motivation. And speaking of perspective shifts, let's talk about failure.
Okay, because nobody actually likes to fail, right?
Right.
So how do we go from like dreading it to actually embracing it?
I think it's all about how we're defining failure. So instead of viewing it as this like dead end, what if we saw it as feedback? An opportunity to learn and change our approach.
Yeah, like that Edison quote, I haven't failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work.
Exactly. So each failure is like a stepping stone to success. And it's in those moments where you're struggling, where you actually grow the most. Think about it. If you're, acing every test, are you really being challenged?
That's a good point.
Are you really learning?
Yeah, it's when we stumble that we're forced to like really dig in and find new strategies.
And that brings us back to, long-term success over short-term gratification. Because embracing failure and seeing it as a way to learn, that's a crucial part of having that growth mindset.
So instead of saying like, "Ooh, I'm terrible at math," it's more like, "Okay, I haven't mastered this yet,
Exactly.
but I'm willing to put in the work."
Exactly. And, you're not alone in this. It's easy to feel like you're the only one who's struggling, especially when it seems like, everyone else has it figured out.
Totally. Yeah. But like we were saying, everyone learns differently. What works for your best friend might not work for you, and that's okay.
Absolutely. So reach out to people,
Yeah.
your teachers, your classmates, your family, even start a study group. Sometimes just saying your struggles out loud can really help.
Yeah, there's power in sharing those experiences. You can learn from others who are going through, like, maybe even the same thing. And let's be real, studying with a buddy is way more fun than going it alone.
Right.
Like,
Right.
having that support system can make all the difference. It's like we're hardwired for connection, even when it comes to something like studying.
Yeah. And even little things like visual reminders, those can help too, right? Keep you motivated, keep your eye on the prize.
Okay, but not like those cheesy posters with the kittens hanging on, right?
No, not those. Think less like generic poster and more like, a vision board even.
Yeah.
Something that really speaks to you,
Yeah.
like a visual representation of what you're going for, what you want to achieve.
So like a mood board, but for your academic goals.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I love that. You could even put like pictures that make you feel how you want to feel while you're studying. Like if you want to feel super focused and calm, maybe a picture of like a nature.
There you go.
And that got me thinking, what if we take that sensory experience even further? Instead of just visual, what about like a playlist?
Ooh, a steady soundtrack. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because music is so powerful, right? Like, it can totally put you in a certain mood. It's like your own personal study montage. Exactly. So you've got your upbeat tracks for when you need some energy. Then you've got, like, the instrumental stuff for when you really need to focus. You could even throw in a few songs that, like, remind you of your goals.
Yeah, it's like you're creating a sonic landscape. Which, now that I think about it, I actually do that when I'm writing. Certain playlists just get me in the zone. But I never even thought about doing it for studying.
There you go.
Oh.
See? Even with the deep dive like this, there's always something new to learn, a new way to look at things. And that's really, I think, what I hope you take away from this. It's not about one magic solution. It's about figuring out what works for you, in your own learning journey.
So as we're wrapping up here, what's like the one thing, that aha moment from today that really stuck with you that you're going to try like right away to kind of up your study game?
And remember, even small changes can make a difference over time. So whether it's, setting a specific goal, maybe trying a new study technique,
Yeah.
or, hey, even making that epic playlist, the important thing is to just get started.
Yeah.
Because knowing stuff is great, but actually using it, that's where the magic happens. So get out there, unlock that potential. You got this.